Global Americans, 28th of July 2023, Security Implications of the China-Cuba Alliance in the Second Cold War. China has waged a full-scale assault against all democratic countries and any that desire to resist Chinese hegemony, as a part of their 100-year war strategy. Cuba and China formed a solid and comprehensive relationship following the end of the Cold War. Their cooperation now consists of two parts. First, China's diverse interests in Latin America and the Caribbean are furthered by Cuba, which is economically dependent on China. Second, the alliance satisfies China's strategic requirements in two key fields: biotechnology and neurosciences and military intelligence. Cuba is a nasty commercial and investment partner. It owes China billions of dollars in debt and needs substantial assistance and humanitarian relief. The nation has, however, made China's incredibly successful regional economic, political, and geostrategic onslaught possible. China is now the second largest trading partner in the region after the United States and South America's first. China has obtained new markets and preferential access to raw materials thanks to trade, which increased from $12 billion in 2000 to $445 billion in 2021. China already controls crucial infrastructure projects, such as 56 ports and telecommunications in 29 nations, thanks to loans totaling over $150 billion. Currently, China is where military troops from the region undergo cybersecurity and military doctrine training. These factors have increased the likelihood of nefarious commercial activity, economic and political pressure, and asymmetrical attacks on infrastructure. Additionally, it has bolstered China's goal of civilian-military fusion, which aims to make its military the most sophisticated in the world and capable of defeating the United States. The Wall Street Journal reported in June last year that Cuba and China were collaborating to run 4 electronic surveillance sites there and were in talks to build a military training center. China is said to have cooperated with Cuba on military and intelligence projects since the 1990s, selling military hardware and offering training. The Chinese have been present in Cuban signals intelligence (SIGINT) sites since the 1990s, according to one defector. They have been there since the 1980s. Uncertainty surrounds the conditions of China's engagement. However, it has been claimed that China offers Cuba technical training, equipment, and supplies in exchange for a presence on the island and sharing gathered intelligence. Radio China transmissions from Cuba and China's construction of Cuba's telecommunications infrastructure have concealed the radio-electronic activities. Many exiles have long claimed that the communist government in Cuba has amassed vast amounts of information about the United States and other nations and shared it with allies for financial gain and to cement ties. An unnamed official of the Cuban regime said that the nation's radio-electronic brigade, a division of the military intelligence, DIM, currently manages its SIGINT operations from a base buried beneath Havana. The priority of the brigade has always been to intercept any communications sent by the U.S. military into the U.S. mainland, Central America, the Caribbean, and northern South America. It has also employed encrypted communications with its embassies, intelligence hubs, and extensive network of spies worldwide while routinely monitoring the Cuban population and foreign targets. With China's assistance, Cuba has also used information technology to monitor Venezuela and strategically propagate digital dictatorship in the region. Cuba has specifically used its army of internet trolls to further its goals online. Its information warfare has even baffled New York air traffic controllers and interfered with transmissions to Iran, calling for democracy. The U.S. government claims that in 2019, China's cyber espionage from Cuba increased. Coincidentally, Cuba placed surprisingly large orders for Chinese broadcasting equipment despite experiencing a severe economic crisis. This amount significantly climbed to $276.6 million between 2016 and 2021, surpassing Chinese imports of food and medicine even as total imports decreased. The strategic partnership in biotechnology, which is by a directive from the Chinese government to have China's biotech sector grow and surpass that of the United States and the West, is another essential pillar of the relationship between Cuba and China. In at least 30 joint biotech initiatives, it has relied on technology transfers from Cuba. This is alarming, given that Cuba has had access to biowarfare technology since the 1980s. Several defectors also provided information about a possible biowarfare program in the early 2000s. Additionally, 5 neurotechnological items are being developed in collaboration between China and Cuba in the fields of bioengineering and neurotechnology. The neuroscience and mind control projects in Cuba date back to the 1960s and have been used to torture political opponents and American POWs in Vietnam. Since the 1980s, it has produced breakthrough CNS medications and treatments through experimental methods of dubious safety, tainted by moral failings and allegations of atrocities. The U.S. government has been alerting the public that China is attempting to obtain the technology needed to dominate the biotechnology and neurosciences industries. The United States prohibited transfers and exports to China's Academy of Military Medical Sciences in December 2021 and to 11 other organizations thought to be developing brain control weapons to oppress minorities and rule over Chinese civilians. The People's Liberation Army has described ongoing brain warfare research in several papers, including mind control technologies intended to subdue the adversary and neuro-defense gear and brain-implanted microchips to thwart similar attacks. Finding proof of this illegal activity is challenging. Military and intelligence activities require secrecy, and biotech and neuroscience facilities in China and Cuba are closely guarded operations. Therefore, a thorough analysis of all potential dangers is required. To ensure adherence to the Biological Weapons Convention, the international community should demand an expert inspection of Cuba's biotechnology facilities and an independent examination of any collaborations involving dual-use technology. If adequately implemented, U.S. laws and regulations would help to restrict Cuba better, cut off funding for the dictatorship, and support the Cuban people in their quest for freedom. Starting with the state sponsor of terrorism designation, the Cuban Liberty and Democratic Solidarity Act, and the Trafficking in Persons Victims Act, a complete examination should ensure their full execution. China will have to reassess its investments in the Caribbean island if the Cuban economy and the regime's grip on power continue to deteriorate. A free and democratic Cuba would then be highly beneficial to the region.